Mystery of Apollo 13 mission. On 11th April 1970, a rocket launched for the Apollo 13 mission from Kennedy Space Center in America. 3 astronauts were on it going to the moon. But the interesting thing was that not a year had passed since the day when Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon first time. This was already the third NASA mission to send humans to the moon. Seeing the success of the last two missions, the astronauts in this rocket were very confident about their mission and their dream. Their dream was to set foot on the moon. But at the time, they were unaware that their dream would never come true. In April 1970, when their spacecraft was about 330,000 kilometers away from the Earth, they heard a loud bang suddenly, a huge bang that shook the entire spacecraft. Within a few seconds, the warning lights and alarms started going on. It was found that one of the oxygen tanks had burst, and the other oxygen tank was leaking rapidly. The mission control on the ground could not believe it. They believed that instruments were malfunctioning, but the astronauts in the spacecraft could see through the window that the air was leaking. On the other hand, they see that because of the blast, the spacecraft had shifted from its path so much that it was going kilometers away from the Earth every second. Within a few hours, the astronauts in Apollo 13 were so far away from the Earth that it became a new record. To date, no human has gone so far from the Earth as these three astronauts did during Apollo 13 mission. Forget landing on the moon, the question back was whether they could return to Earth alive. This is the distressing story of Apollo 13. In 1961, American President John F. Kennedy promised the world that before the end of the decade, he would have humans to the moon. This promise should be seen in the context of the Cold War. At that time, America and the Soviet Union were engaged in a race, a space race. In 1969, Apollo 11 and Apollo 12 missions were successful. Astronauts did not only step on the moon, but also safely returned to the Earth. Kennedy's promise was fulfilled, but it has had a side effect. Right after it, the people's and government interest in spending money on space decreased drastically. For this reason, the American government cut NASA's budget and many future missions that were planned for new few years were cancelled. That's why the Apollo 13 mission came at a crucial time in the history of space travel. NASA had to prove to the American government that it was still worth spending money on space. That's why the primary mission objective of Apollo 13 was not only to inspect and survey the moon's soil, but to also develop the human capability to work in the moon's environment. Mission's third day, 13 April, the crew is told that they have to do some tests on the lunar module, and they have to do a broadcast for the television, where they will use the cameras to show the interiors of the command module and service module to the world. Now the audience interest in this was so low that no television network showed this broadcast at that time. About 6.5 minutes after the end of the TV broadcast, the flight controller on the ground asked astronaut Swigert to check the oxygen level. There was nothing unusual in this. It was just a routine check of the oxygen tanks in the service module. And while the check was being done, suddenly a huge explosion occurred. Many warning lights and alarms went off. The astronauts in spacecraft were largely in shock. Commander Lowell contacted Mission Control and said, "Houston, we have had a problem." It turned out that one tank of oxygen was completely empty and the oxygen level in the other tank was going down rapidly. Mission Control on the ground first thought that The instruments must be showing the wrong data, but that was the truth. Everyone needed to take action urgently if they wanted to save the lives of these astronauts. The oxygen tanks in this spacecraft were sphere shaped. Due to the extreme heating, the insulation of electrical wires in the oxygen tank were damaged. Before the mission, NASA's managers and engineers had approved the tank after a thorough investigation, but they were unable to see this internal damage. That's why during the Apollo 13 mission, during routine check of the tank on the third day, due to these electric wires, there was a spark and the tank explodes. Now everybody had to make an important decision: which way could they take to return to Earth? The fastest way to return to Earth was to rotate the spacecraft, but to do this, main engine of the service module had to be started. Main engine was located near the blast in the CSM module. No one knew whether the engine was damaged or not. The second way to return to the Earth was to go toward the Moon and circle around the Moon to return to Earth. For this, the engine of service module would not be required, but the risk was that it would take 4 to 5 days to return to Earth. Did the astronauts have enough oxygen and water left? NASA's flight directors chose the second option. The astronauts were told to shift down the CSM module immediately, and while returning, they were told to use the lunar module as a lifeboat. Though this decision was a safe option, it did have several problems. Lunar module was designed in such a way that only 2 astronauts could sit in it for about 20 hours because its original purpose was to land on the Moon and get attached to CSM module again. But now it was expected that these 3 people would sit in the lunar module for 4 to 5 days. As per this plan, the astronauts sat in the lunar module. And for the first fire, lunar module engine were fired. With the help of this burn, they reached the other side of the Moon. After that, they faced another problem: the high concentration of carbon dioxide. Astronauts were instructed not to drink more than 200 ml water in a day, because if they drink more water, they will need to urinate, and in this way, the quantity of their urine could change the direction of spaceship. That's why they needed to survive by drinking so side. The people watching it on television finally breathed again. All 3 astronauts survived. The parachute was developed in the command module and it slowly fell into the Pacific Ocean. The 3 astronauts returned home safe and sound. Although this mission failed, no one of these 3 astronauts set foot on the Moon, but still this Apollo 13 mission made its mark on the pages of history. Please like, share and subscribe. Thank you so much.